Hello everyone, I'm John from Fast Films and today we are going to take a look at a 2009 American horror film, called The Last House on the Left. The movie flips off with two people driving home a captured man in the middle of the night. The driver discusses for a while with the passengers, named Morton and Giles, while stopping near a train track for the oncoming train. While they wait, they're attacked by masked people from another car. Francis and Sadie eliminate Giles and rescue Krug, who finishes off Morton. In the next scene, Mari is seen swimming in a pool. She swims all the way to the other end of the pool to meet her mother, Emma, who records her swim time. Emma pays her husband's hospital a visit. She tries to see her husband John but ends up getting ignored as he's too busy tending to a wounded patient. Later that day, Emma drives home with Mari as she receives a call about a high school guy. She gets off the call and talks to Mari for a while before waking up John in the backseat. They chat for a while before arriving at their destination. They get off their van and unpack their stuff to move in. After settling in, John checks out some gifts Emma's brother left for them in the house. Shortly after, Mari walks outside to explore the exotic river not too far from the house. She starts her swim training. After her swim, she takes a shower, dresses up, and goes outside to join her parents. She then asks them if she could go meet up with Paige, and her father says yes and gives her the car keys and some money. Mari drives off to town and meets up with Paige in the supermarket. They discuss a bit about a past classmate when she sees a stranger named Justin. They call him to the counter and introduce themselves to him. Justin asks them for a pack of cigarettes without an ID. Justin then offers to show them some substance at his place if they give him his cigarettes without checking his ID. They all agree and follow him to his house. Paige follows Justin into his house, leaving Mari in the car. Mari searches for some cell signal when a creepy woman scares her. The lady asks Mari if she owned an item she found lying around somewhere, but Mari says no. Mari gets out of the car later on and walks into the house. She sees Justin and Paige smoking pot on the bed and joins them reluctantly. Emma, Mary's mother, calls her and tells her to come back home. Mari then suggests staying over at Paige's, but her mother doesn't allow her. Unfortunately, the cell signal breaks and Mari gets the idea of staying anyway. After the call, the trio goes into a smoker's frenzy. They discuss Justin and Mary's sad family experiences and decide to do a makeover for Justin. While at it, three people come into the house. Krug, Francis and Sadie introduce themselves to Paige and Mari. Just then, things get more awkward between Mari and the others as Krug punches Justin in the face. After some time, they start harassing Mari and Paige. Paige breaks off Francis's grasp, runs to the bathroom and locks the door. She shouts out for help but all to no avail. Francis breaks down the door and knocks out Paige. The trio gets rid of Mari and Paige's phone and takes them captive. Justin mutters something and gets reprimanded by his father, Krug. Krug tells him to take responsibility for his actions now that he's brought them to their hideout. Shortly after, they all get into Mary's car for a drive. While on the road, a police car passes by and notices nothing wrong with their car. Later, Krug drives them somewhere else. Mari helps them with some directions as she plans their escape. She presses the cigar lighter on the car into the slot to heat it up and waits. As soon as it's heated up, she picks it up and presses it against Sadie's face. A fight breaks out in the car as Mari tries desperately to escape the car. Eventually, Krug loses control of the car and it rolls down a slope and hits a tree. Paige crawls out but is beaten up by Krug. Francis and Sadie get out of the car and keep beating up the girl. Paige manages to escape them and runs into the woods, leaving Mari behind. Francis and Sadie chase after Paige while Krug stays behind to keep Mari captive. Justin stares at his father as he regrets his actions. Paige runs as fast as she could and manages to stay out of their sight. Francis and Paige then run in the wrong direction and Paige runs towards a construction site. She screams for help but is captured again by Sadie and Francis. They capture her and return her back to Krug and the others. Krug tries to force Justin on Mari. Krug makes Justin take advantage of Mari. Paige calls them out for being horrendous people. Krug gets up and attacks Paige multiple times and leaves her down to go out. Mari walks up to her friend and tries to comfort her. Mari then leaves Paige on the ground as Krug forces her to the ground. Krug later forces himself on Mari as Sadie holds her down. Mari, on the other hand, manages to stand up in pain. She then picks up a rock, hides it out of sight and hits Krug on the head. As Krug writhes in pain, Mari runs towards the river to swim her way to safety. Her assailants pursue her but stop at the river shore. Krug fires his gun at Mari, who's in the water, and manages to get a hit on Mari. Mary's body stays afloat on the water as it starts to rain. The terrible trio walks back to their crash site and forces Justin out of there. Meanwhile, Emma and John have some dinner. As they finish up their food, they hear a loud knock on their door. Emma opens the door and sees the 4 assailants from earlier. Krug tells Emma that they got into an accident not quite long ago and she invites them inside. John treats Francis's broken nose as the others talk to Emma. After some chit-chat, Krug asks for their landline and Emma shows it to them. While Emma serves them tea and refreshments, a lightning strike takes out the power. John, who's sewing back Francis's broken nose, leaves the needle in his nose to start up their power generator. While outside, Krug discusses with Emma about family and all. Sadie, however, almost breaks their cover as she asks Emma how many houses they have. Luckily, Emma sidesteps the question and continues her chat with Krug. John starts up their power generator and gets back to sewing back Francis's broken nose. He finishes up Francis's nose and uses some antiseptic cream to clean up the wound. Meanwhile, Mari swims to shore and walks out of the river. On the other hand, the 4 criminals sit on their couch and Emma notices Justin acting like he's afraid of something. Sadie comes in to save the day. Justin asks John and Emma for the bathroom and Emma tells him that it's near the kitchen. Justin walks to the kitchen. He sees a picture of Mari on the refrigerator door and breaks down. Emma comes by and asks if Justin was okay, but he says yes and runs to a bathroom on his right. He locks himself there and Krug comes to ask him if he is okay. Justin says yes and is threatened by Krug not to say anything. Justin eventually comes out of the bathroom and meets Krug, who tells him to follow them to the room they were going to sleep in. Meanwhile, Mari is seen by the shore. Emma shows them the room in the guest house. She then walks back to their main building as Francis, their freak, stares at her. John tries to lock his door when he hears some sound from their porch. They walk outside to see their daughter on the front porch in miserable condition. John and his wife carry their daughter back into the house and resuscitate her. They then check out her wounds and start to heal them. Emma rushes to the kitchen counter to heat up a knife and close the wound. However, before she goes, she notices Mary's necklace under a plastic cup. Apparently, Justin put it there before going to the guest house. John gets the knife and uses the heat to close the flesh wound on Mary's back. He then looks down at his daughter's body and notices that she's been disgraced. Mari tells them she can't breathe and John punctures her lungs to release the pressure, allowing some air in. Mari eventually passes out and Emma tells John about the necklace she found under the cup and the backstory behind it. John realizes the trouble they were in and tells her about their daughter's situation. Emma freaks out and John conditions her to man up so they can get through the night. Back at the guest house, Justin waits for his father and uncle to go to sleep and stares at the gun near his father's bed. John gets out of his house and unwraps a boat. Krug gets off the bed to do something and Justin steals his father's gun. John runs back to the house to find the boat keys. Emma and John start looking for the key. Francis invades the house and sees Emma, who was staring at a knife. Francis says he needs some beer to help himself sleep. Emma keeps the knife behind her and tries to tempt Francis into drinking some wine. Meanwhile, John ransacks his entire garage and finds the key. Emma tries to find a wine bottle in the fridge but secretly removes Mary's picture from the fridge so Francis doesn't know Mari was their daughter. Francis is none the wiser and plays along with his impending victim. John's still at the garage as he picks up an axe. Emma invites Francis to their hot tub upstairs and he proceeds to their living room. Francis, however, sees Mari and wonders how she got there. Before he could make sense of his situation, Emma breaks a wine bottle on his head. Francis chases her back to the kitchen and ends up getting wounded by Emma. Francis manages to attack Emma despite his wound. He pins Emma down on the table but she frees herself and runs to her husband. John injures Francis further, saving his wife in the process. Francis then runs to a window to call Krug and the others. However, John manages to pull him back. Francis walks back to the kitchen to get a weapon but is stopped by Emma. John joins his wife and they both eliminate Francis completely. John and his wife stare at each other and proceed towards the guest house. Upon reaching there, they walk in armed and silent. They see Justin with his father's gun across the room. They stop for a while as Justin offers them the gun to use. John then slowly proceeds to collect the gun as he watches Sadie and Krug sleep. Sadie and Krug wake up as John hits Sadie's neck. Krug jumps out of bed and a fight ensues. Krug manages to escape to their main building. Meanwhile, Sadie fights it off with John in the guest's bathroom. Justin joins in and gets knocked out in the process. Krug sees his late brother, Francis, in the kitchen and gets frustrated. Back at the guest house, John and Emma take out Sadie and run back to their house. Krug preps for their invasion. John and Emma enter their house and start looking for Krug. Emma searches through the house and sees Justin, who stares at her. They then continue their hunt for Krug. John calls out to Krug, who answers him from his hiding place. Krug keeps talking to John as he searches desperately for a weapon. John proceeds upstairs gently to find Krug. He hears a sound in a room upstairs and checks it out. He sees the window open and thinks Krug escaped through it. Just then, Krug comes from behind the door and attacks John. They get into a fight and Krug ends up winning the fight. Krug knocks down John and explains to him how he disgraced his daughter. John, however, devises a plan to take Krug but ends up almost getting knocked in the process. Just as he's about to finish up John, Justin points a gun at his father's head. After finding the gun empty, Krug attacks his son, almost losing him in the process. He's stopped, however, by Emma, who uses a fire extinguisher to knock him out. John and Emma stare at Krug, knocked out cold and unconscious. By morning, John takes his family and Justin out on a ride to a hospital in their boat. As Krug comes to, he notices he's been paralyzed from his waist down. He sees John trying to perform some sort of surgery over him and demands to know what he's trying to do with him. John puts Krug's head in a microwave and walks away. The movie ends as Krug screams at the top of his lungs.